hyperinflation. If you thought 10% inflation we reached after COVID was high, or in 1970s, you guys have not seen anything. Even, for example, Argentina has gone through some troubles. They have inflation rates of about 150%. That is a very high inflation, but that is not hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is kind of a runaway chain reaction. It's the nuclear version of inflation. You get your salary in the morning, by the time you leave work and go home, prices have doubled. I mean, it wasn't that bad, or the central bank wasn't fast enough to issue new higher denomination currencies. You had to take a suitcase of currency to buy 2 pounds of tomatoes or something like that. Let me show you some denominations. Mark denominations or mark banknotes in Weimar Republic. Let me see. You don't have to know a lot of German to figure out what that number is. 5 is the German word for 5. Milliarden is billion. That's a banknote for 5 billion marks. Okay. This is 500 million. This is 50 billion. Oh, this is 500 billion. 5 billion. 5 billion. Actually, the stamp 1 million marks. Turkey went through something like that. Back when I was a kid, I think my father was getting a salary of 1,000 lira a month, but $1 used to buy only about 9 Turkish liras those days. By the time I went back to Turkey in '96, I started working in the industry. My signing bonus was $10,000, and I converted that into, let me see, what was it, 70,000, into 700 million Turkish liras. I became immediately almost a billionaire, because $1 bought 70,000 Turkish lira. By the time I came back in 2003, $1 bought 1.5 million Turkish lira. The largest banknote was 50 million. When I was a child, the largest currency was 1,000. Then later on, they got rid of 6 zeros from the currency. So if you had 50 million lira, you had 50 lira. Now the largest currency is 200. Of course, the exchange rate changed quite a bit. Back in 2005, exchange rate was about 1.5. Now it's 26.50. Even the last 5 years, it went from about 6 to 26.50. But those weren't hyperinflation. Those are sustained high inflation. So over 20, 40 years, things add up. All of this stuff happened within a year or two. Okay? I mean, if you're looking for, among others, reasons why Nazi Party became a force in Germany, you could go back to that inflation. And that's because, among other reasons, France insisted that they wanted war reparations from Germany. You know, they were vindictive and they paid for it about 15 years later. So gold standard never actually completely came back, and there were some attempts, but because of the big trade imbalances, it was never long-lived. Then obviously the Second Great War started, or we should call it the Greater War. But in 1944, at that point, this is after Normandy, it was a given conclusion that once there was a beachhead in France, Germans were going to lose the war, and Japanese had started losing a lot of territory anyway. It was just a matter of time when the war was going to end. So the Allies said, okay, let's get together and kind of plan what's going to happen to the monetary system after the war. They got together in a little town in New Hampshire. Let me see it. If I can get some pictures of that. It's a quiet little town with ski resorts and stuff. And you get beautiful foliage. The color of trees in late August, early September in New England is out of this world. I mean, you see some of that around here, especially close to Appalachian, but nothing like up there. Trees become pretty much almost every tone of red and green that you can imagine. Some people do actually tours. They start late August in northern Maine. They just drive down until Connecticut. So they got together in that town and they said, okay, we're going to start a kind of a modified gold standard. Only US dollars would be officially fixed gold, and the rate was $35. So if you took 1 ounce of gold to Federal Reserve, they were required to give you $35. Or if you took $35 to Federal Reserve, they were required to give you 1 ounce of gold. All the other countries fixed, or as the euphemism goes, pegged their exchange rate, pegged their currency to US dollars. So France said, okay, $1 is going to get you 10 French francs, or this was actually 6. Or 1 pound is going to get you, at that point, it was around 3 US dollars. So on. Every country fixed it, but each country was allowed to devalue their currency. If they had big trade imbalances, remember, gold standard adjustment is an adjustment mechanism, but it takes a while. A country like US can afford to live through that adjustment process. But a country like, let's say in 1950s, Brazil, okay? The economy is so fragile, they cannot live through a GDP growth of negative 20%, okay? What happens, there is social unrest. Of course, that means in Latin America, a military coup. That's why there were so many military coups in Latin America those days. But there is an easier way. You devalue your currency. For example, Turkey had issues in 1957. Until then, $1 bought about 1 Turkish lira. In 1957, overnight, $1 bought 3 liras. Okay? They devalued the currency by 2/3. That created a lot of social unrest, which eventually led to a military coup in 1960. And we had another one in 1970, another one in 1980. Okay? By the time 1980 coup came, I think $1 was buying about 25 liras. In 1979, when I was just starting high school, it was 9. So even devaluation didn't happen fast enough, but a big devaluation has also brought inflation. So, but it wasn't as bad as the original gold standard. You at least had a way out. I'm going to continue on Wednesday. In 1972-73, certain developments happened and France decided to attack US dollar, which led to Federal Reserve abandoning the gold standard, which means the Bretton Woods was completely gone. But we'll talk about all of that on Wednesday.